So for context on exactly what this post is about and how it came to be, years ago about the time that Endgame came out, I had the idea for the Venator class and crew versus Thanos' ship and crew. So I took the time to research it and write it out on the app Amino. And now, years later that I'm making content on TikTok and YouTube, I decided to show this out to everyone since I thought it was really good. One of the issues is, though, that it's so long, I decided to put it all into a word reader and have it read it out like that, so I'm not straining my voice and taking hours upon hours trying to read it out, deleting recordings, and trying again. One other thing to keep in mind is at the time of writing this, the game had just came out, so there was very little information on Thanos' ship at the time, so I had to make some assumptions. Maybe someday I'll revisit this and use the more updated knowledge that we have to make a match.
In one corner is a standard Venator-class Star Destroyer from the Clone Wars and its whole crew versus Thanos' ship and crew from Endgame. Thanos' ship has the Black Order, all its troops, and the eel things. No exact numbers known at the time this was written. The Star Destroyer has its normal crew of 7,400 clones and other officers and 2,000 clone troops. It also has a normal assortment of walkers, tanks, ground ships, and starships, as well as 3 Jedi, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ashoka. The fight will take place over the Avengers base, basically just putting the Venator into Endgame climax. This is equal parts ship, fighters, army, and generals fight. Thanos excluded. Flagships. When the fight starts, the ships will attack each other as they deploy troops. So let's start with the Star Destroyer. It had 52 laser cannons for taking out enemy ships, 8 dual turbo laser cannons, and proton torpedoes. Can carry 400 fighters, which we'll get to later. It had a reinforced armored hull and shield. Thanos' ship doesn't have any stats at the time of writing this. But this is what we know: it has teleportation beam technology and rectangle deployment ships. Several missiles that cratered the Avengers base, and a few dozen laser ports. How would the fight go? I think Thanos' ship would start firing right away. It can teleport part of its team straight to the surface and not have any issue of them getting in the crossfires. The rest make the journey and secure ships that would take little damage. This will help later when I cover the troops. But it has most of its firepower pointing forward, while Venators have to rotate from the side to the front. So it can begin firing right away. This will start hurting the destroyer immediately and probably damage some ships going for the ground. With the firepower of its missiles, the shields won't hold long and it can put the ship out of commission quickly. That said, Thanos' ship doesn't seem to have a shield at all, so the destroyer won't need long to bring it down as well. Overall, I think both ships will go down before very long. However, I will say that I believe the destroyer could retain some function that may or may not be useful later. The next engagement in the fight would be the airships. The Venator has about 400 pilots and ships. V-Wings and ARC 170s will say half and half. Both are great for fighting and used specifically for taking down other ships like vulture droids. They have all the lasers and missiles to do the job as well. But they also have around 50 gunships. These would be used very differently, but they still have missiles and clone-mounted lasers. Thanos' ships. The 2-man ships they have that we see a lot in Avengers have 1 soldier's hooked as the driver and 1 that stands in the gunner position. In an air battle, these will go down easily. Crashing is their biggest problem, as they give no cover, so even infantry could shoot them down by aiming at the exposed pilots. They lack firepower, so they are just for movement. And we see a few real ships like what was used in Guardians of the Galaxy. These are a lot like TIE fighters. They can take down some ships but are kinda brittle. Valkyrie was able to cut through one and it blows up. And then there is one more but, the giant flying eels that aren't ships, but would be a big part of the air battle. They have no long-range capability but can eat and crash into ships. They're also pretty durable and they have around half a dozen of them. Results. Some of the air support on both sides will be destroyed during deployment as the flagships attack each other and go down. But the big advantage the Republic has here is numbers. After the first flyby of engagement, I think about 70% of Thanos' ships will be down. A few actual ships, but mostly the eels will be left. Those will take some time to take down, but if 50 or more ships all launch torpedoes at them, they will go down eventually. Republic airships will be primarily used to transport troops and tanks. Some will go down from Thanos' main ship attacking right away. But after, they wouldn't really be needed to help in the air battle, as it will mostly be over. so it can provide early air support, distract Thanos tanks and soldier fire away from ground forces and cause massive damage to the enemy ground forces. But artillery and generals won't have too hard of a time bringing them down. By the end of the ship battle, I imagine at least 100 if not 200 ships will be left. These will not only help to totally destroy Thanos' ship, putting it totally out of commission, while the Venator might retain some functions. Then they can do some passes on the enemy army, providing air support for the Republic, and be a big advantage. Now I don't think they will win the fight for just them. Thanos' artillery and commanders will have to divert time to them to take them out, but they will go down. Artillery is a bit of an unfair section, but I'll cover it quickly. Venators carries 24 AT walkers. They have a large cannon on top, 4 smaller guns in the front, and 2 in the back. Surprisingly fast with extremely powerful guns and reinforced hulls. Thanos' tanks. Well, they exist, and that's all we can say. They have about 7 of them. From what we see, they have a main gun and a couple of side ones. Can't say how strong or durable they are. Conclusion: so the gunships bring down the tanks, but a couple will go down from Thanos' ship fire. About 18 make it to the ground and 4 stay on the ship. They form a line with them and the soldiers for the initial wave. They do a lot of damage before the soldiers reach them. Unfortunately, we will see in the next part that when that happens they won't last long. Thanos' tanks just fire on enemy aircraft and also get taken out by them. No big impact. But look out for the next one, which will be big. Soldiers. The big issue here is that we have no idea how big exactly Thanos' army is, unlike the Venator's forces. Not to mention it's impossible that all those soldiers, eels, and other equipment to fit into their ship and it still operate properly. My rough estimates, they have 3,100 with a generous calculation. Most of their army is Chitauri, the soldiers from Avengers. A lightly armored alien species. Their main weapons are either arm mountain cannons and rifles with a laser bayonet on the bottom. They're stronger than a normal human soldier, but not very superhuman. They were overpowered by Black Widow. Probably about 1,500 of them. The next and most dangerous member of his army is the Outriders. These berserker-type warriors are as fast as Captain America, meaning they can run around 70 miles an hour and can tear through steel. About another 1,500. Next is about 90 Sakharan soldiers, most noteworthy from Guardians of the Galaxy. Impressively fully armored, they have either a sword or a blaster. Notably in fewer numbers and slower, since they are nowhere to be seen in the initial clash. The final ground soldier I call gorillas. A large and strong beast that seem to be capable of running as fast as the majority of other troops. Now onto the Venator team. They have the clone troopers. Genetically altered clones of Jango Fett, one of the greatest bounty hunters ever. These are amazing soldiers. Due to the droids outnumbering them in the war, one clone trooper might typically kill tens to hundreds of droids. Most used a DC-15S blaster carbine and had 1 or 2 side pistols in the form of a DC-17 hand blaster. But some had the bigger DC-15A blaster rifle, and 1 or 2 in a group would carry the heavy power Z6 rotary blaster cannon, a minigun blaster for mowing down enemies. The troops were unique and strict. Each squad was able to perform many different missions. Outfitted with armor that could block some blasts but not many, so it was very movable and didn't restrict motion. In total, a ship would carry 2,000 for battle and 400 for pilots, and more among the rest of the 7,000 other crew members. Some of those 7,000 would be humans and nothing special with just some blaster pistols, but the majority of the crew were clones. Conclusion: 20 gunships with Jedi, who we will cover next, and troopers come down. 2 get blown up on the way. None of the Jedi die. They get down and out and form a defense with the tanks, but the gunships aren't able to get the other 1,400 troopers before the Venator goes down. Maybe 10% of Thanos' forces are killed during their landing. Outriders charge ahead of all the other soldiers when the Black Order, also next time, gives them their order to attack. But they face heavy fire from the tanks and clones, who, although are outnumbered 2 to 1 at this moment, have superior artillery and air support. And the clones are used to dealing with much higher numbers, and the Jedi are up front fighting alongside them while the Black Order hangs back. Clones also have the advantage of better armor and weapons. Hawkeye could kill any soldier on Thanos' team with his arrows, so only the gorillas will be able to tank a couple of blaster bolts without going down. And most of Thanos' forces are melee fighters, while the Clone Wars were all fought at mid to long distances. Thanos' army takes a heavy hit, but as soon as they reach the tank line the tables turn. Droids are not good at fighting up close, so the clones never had to worry about it, but now they are facing expert hand-to-hand fighters that only the best of the best and Jedi can handle. The small group is almost instantly devastated by the forces, and the Jedi have to sacrifice the tanks to get away with a very small handful of clones, mainly the ARC troopers and clone leaders. They hightail it away. Fortunately, while the Venator did go down, it still would have some crew surviving, able to fight, and some ship functions like turrets. So what was a 500 versus 1,400 battle after the first encounter has now become 4,500 versus 1,400. Any attack by Thanos' forces would be repelled with minimum casualties. We'll say that from the crash and attacks only clones and Jedi survive. Seeing the unfavorable odds, the Black Order would withdraw as much as they can and wait till they have taken all their air forces to attack again. By this point, it's the Black Order and over 1,000 Chitauri left. All the Outriders would have run to their death versus the Jedi, not fresh for battle, and roughly 4,000 clones. The Venator will be only a structure at this point, but now the troopers would be able to salvage their last tanks from the ship and have them on standby. Next time I'll cover the elites of each group. Elites, so the final showdown is here. On the Venator team, we have 3 Jedi and clone elites. The Jedi need no introduction. They have the lightsaber, a blade of plasma hotter than the sun. They also have the Force, which can give them precog, telekinesis, mind manipulation, and all-around augmented stats. They can block blaster fire from the youngest age, which, considering bullets do exist in Star Wars, have to be superior to them in every way, including speed. Their physical strength makes them able to bare hand tear through steel droids. Anakin was stated to hit with a force of meteors, which can wipe out cities or, worse, ask the dinosaurs. Then again, that was rage-amped Episode 3 Anakin. We will be using Clone Wars Season 5 characters, but their levels of power are the same as base Episode 3. These are the basic stats of the Jedi for this fight. Obi-Wan attack. Building level, Force pushed Grievous into a crane, comparable Force lifting to Anakin's speed. Hypersonic can block blasters and real bullets likely faster than ours. Anakin attack, building level, comparable to Vader 5 years after being burnt, could lift 150,000 tons. Speed, same as Obi-Wan. Ahsoka attack, small building level, stronger than some Jedi Masters. Speed, hypersonic, can react to close range blasters after fired. Then there are the clones. Their leader Captain Rex and Commander Cody are some of the best clones in the army. Essentially, superhumans are on a level close to Jango. There are also several ARC troopers in each squad, more elite than the average trooper, who I already proved are amazing. Thanos, the Black Order, is a scary group. The leader Corvus Glaive, the tank Cull Obsidian, the mind Ebony Maw, and the fighter Proxima Midnight. Corvus is the leader and assassin, an expert strategist, and a great fighter. He uses a war scythe with a blade's end marking it a double-ended weapon, decently armored, but the armor doesn't have any good feats. Attack, wall level, as strong as Captain America. Speed, subsonic. His wife, Proxima, isn't always viewed as the strongest, but she isn't half bad. She is probably the best hand-to-hand of the group. She carries a trident with a blade on its end, another double-end weapon. But hers has an energy amp to it. She can shoot blasts of energy from it. She also has an extendable wrist blade, no notable armor. Attack, wall level, as strong as Corvus. Speed, subsonic. Then the Hulk equivalent Cull Obsidian is a big brute. He is super strong and even more durable, having a transforming weapon attached to a chain and also a wrist blade pop-out thing. He was able to go toe-to-toe with the Hulk Buster and be on the winning end. Again, no notable armor, an unfortunate trend, unlike the wrist blade. Attack, large building level, Spider-Man stops his attacks casually, almost dies to Giant Man, comparable to Hulk Buster. Durability, city level, took Iron Man's hits. Speed, subsonic. Ebony Maw was the first to die, which is a joke, considering he is one of the strongest. He has telekinetic powers that put the Jedi to shame. Though notably no telepathy, he has a genius intellect. Attack, significantly building level, doesn't have many good feats, about as strong as Cull. Durability, doesn't seem to be anything special. Speed, subsonic, struggles to react to his attacks and can't respond to simple rockets. 2 tanks, 3 Jedi, and most of their troops stationed on the ship to fight, with a few wandering the halls of the vessel sweeping for signs of infiltrators. As the forces begin to charge, they would be greatly separated to minimize the effectiveness of the tanks and accidental hits. Cull in front tanking blaster fire, none of it doing a great deal of damage unless it was a tank blast, but stinging like being stabbed with little needles. The infiltration team would already be on their way or inside. Maw will then begin throwing things like rock and scrap metal from nearby and hurling them at the ship to take down the troopers. As they get closer, he would also be able to lift the earth to create cover, so they aren't all in the open getting mowed down. The clones would be firing their rifles better at pegging enemies better than the opposing force, but with 3 times troops and better troops, to begin with, it's not a very tough fight. Maw and Cull attempt to take out the tanks. Cull throws his hammer and takes the first one out, smashing it, but before he can tether it back, Obi-Wan cuts the rope, disarming him. Maw uses his telepathy to pull the other down. It rolls down the ship, taking out troops on the way. At this point, the invasion team will have found their way to the power core but also run into some clones, and one would radio for help before going down. The leaders would radio and tell Obi-Wan, who would take Cody and a few clones to stop them, and all patrol clones would head towards their last known location, increasing the number of fights they have to deal with. Upon seeing this, Corvus would radio to Cull and Maw to start a full push. Maw would begin pulling the ship apart and throwing it back, and then dealing massive damage. The troops would give a final push to the few remaining enemies getting taken out. Anakin and Ahsoka attempt to stop Maw's attacks with their own telekinesis, being reasonably successful but not stopping all of them. Cull begins ripping through the ship, charging up to take out any trooper in his way but taking the sting of 1,000 or so blaster bolts pounding into him. Eventually, he gets to the top with Anakin and Ahsoka having to stop focusing on Maw to deal with him. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan, Cody, and their men find the invasion team. Proxima tells Corvus to go while she and the small group hold off the attackers. Obi-Wan engages Proxima while Corvus leaves. Meanwhile, up top, Anakin and Ahsoka face down Corvus, and Maw tears the ship apart, killing hundreds of soldiers. To be continued. To find out the conclusion in the next post, the conclusion where I will be writing out the whole fight in one post. Conclusion. Obi-Wan and Proxima face off in a hallway leading to the reactor core of the Star Destroyer. Obi-Wan sends most of his troops and Cody to head around and try to cut them off. A few of his clones remain to gun down Proxima's reinforcements. Obi-Wan takes his stance while Proxima strikes. Using his defensive form, Obi-Wan easily parries her strikes. The energy tips and blade at the hilt probably could stand up to a saber strike for some time. Unfortunately, since Obi-Wan uses the most defensive form despite him being much stronger and faster, it'll take him longer to strike back and win. Eventually, I see him cutting her trident in half as he did to Maul. And then he can just cut her down. Meanwhile, outside, Anakin and Ahsoka and the majority of their men would be getting thrashed by Maw and Cull. Anakin would take about half the troops and go after Cull, sending Ahsoka, Rex, and the other half to stop Maw. All the men begin to fire on their respective targets, with the rest of the Black Order's men being killed. Maw would be pinned down as Ahsoka and Rex bound down the side of the ship. Meanwhile, Anakin up top to face down Cull. After defeating Proxima and her forces, Obi-Wan heads to follow Corvus, who would have made it to his target already. He begins to try and make the remains of the ship's power into a bomb, but is interrupted by Cody and his troops. Corvus has his last troops hold them off till it's just him. Picking up his weapon and runs through the troops, dodging their fire and cutting them down. He uses their numbers to his advantage, ducking and weaving in between troops, putting them in the way of the others to slow their fire. He makes it to Cody in the back, who blocks his side with his rifle and he is slashed at. They lock and bind, looking at each other momentarily as Corvus smiles. With a push of strength, cuts through the rifle and spin his side, bringing the back-end blade in front of Cody before he stabs him in the chest. Pulling it out as he walks away, Cody collapsed to the ground. Corvus finished his bomb and radios for the rest of the Black Order to get clear before it goes off. Just then, Obi-Wan makes it there with his soldiers. Seeing Cody's body, he momentarily lashes out with a second of rage before falling back to his defensive form. Corvus can defend against the saber since his side took Vision's laser just fine. Outside, Maul has built up his blaster shield strong enough to start hurling dirt and rock back, taking down the spots he is being fired from. Ahsoka continues straight down towards him while Rex veers off to the side for another target. Up top, Anakin engages Cull. His saber strikes hit, but Cull is a little too durable for them to cut too deep. But with this and all the other lasers, he's been hit by Cull falls to the defensive. Putting some distance between him and the saber, he hurls metal chunks of the ship at Anakin, who cuts or repels them. Cull then begins to tear down the ship, killing the last of the clones as Anakin pursues. Ahsoka reaches the ground and attacks Maul, cutting through his defenses, causing him to fly back to avoid her onslaught of dual blade slashes. But as soon as he gets his concentration back, he can telekinetically grab Ahsoka and begin to squeeze her whole body. Finally, Rex gets to his goal by reaching the tank that fell down the ship. He climbs in and tries to get one last shot off with it. At this time, Corvus's Cull comes in, so Maul and Cull begin to get away. Cull with one massive jump towards Maul. Finally, Rex fires off his blast with the tank as it flies at Maul. He tries to defend, releasing Ahsoka, but he is still sent flying by the explosion of the shot into the nearby ground. Ahsoka, now freed, gets up and gives Rex a thumbs up, only for a second later to have Cull land right on top of her, crushing her flat. Cull looks at the tank jumping into it next, crushing Rex as well. When Anakin sees his apprentice and best friend killed seconds apart, he begins to burn with rage. In the reactor room, Obi-Wan is engaging Corvus, but again his defensive form makes it harder to get the job done quickly. His clone troopers stand to the side preparing to fire, but without an opportunity that wouldn't hit Kenobi. Finally, Kenobi and Corvus begin to blade lock, and using his superior strength, Kenobi forces Corvus to the side so that a clone takes a shot through his leg. As Corvus winces and drops down slightly, Kenobi disengages the lock and separates Corvus's head from his shoulders, letting it roll off the platform. Obi-Wan then quickly gets to work dismantling the core bomb, stopping any potential explosion. Outside, Anakin, the being with the greatest possible force potential, begins to wield both the light and dark side of the Force, leaping farther than he ever had before. He literally flies down at Cull and with all his strength strikes at him. Cull, after destroying the tank, only has a moment to look up as he is attacked before his saber cuts halfway through his arm. As he yells in pain, Anakin gives another push on his handle, finishing the cut and taking off Cull's arm. Cull drops down in pain, trying to hold the searing hot cauterized wound. Anakin turns away from, and then spinning his blade in his hand, plunges it backwards into Cull's chest, finishing off the giant. He turns to Maul, the last of his enemies, who staggers as he tries to get up, having almost been hit by a tank shot and seeing his most powerful ally slain. Anakin charges at him in a full sprint. Maul tries to push him away, but Anakin simply powers through, but he slows the closer he gets and Maul gets his focus back. Eventually, Anakin comes to a stop and slowly slides backwards, the push ripping away his lightsaber, and then his mechanical hand begins to be torn off. Finally, Anakin reaches out with the Force as Maul feels a squeezing feeling on his neck that soon extends to his entire body, and Anakin begins to plant his feet and stops moving. He lifts Maul up and squeezing him tighter and tighter until he looks like an alien smashed soda can. Dropping him down, the anger and rage is replaced by sadness and regret, and Obi-Wan comes out of the ship on the top, looking down at the carnage. He too feels the casualties of war. So at the end, all of the Black Order and their forces were all unalived. But the Republic forces were left with 2 Jedi and a handful of surviving clones. Close fight. But if Anakin had been killed first and didn't get the rage amp, then I think Maul and Cull could easily take down Ahsoka. But that would still leave Obi-Wan. However, with how much weaker Ahsoka was, that was never going to happen. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you later.